and living in squalor. That was the answer. During the day, I was writing in cafes, as everyone famously knows. But could I just say, for the record, once and for all, because it's really irritating me, I did not write in cafes to escape my unheated flat, because I am not stupid enough to rent an unheated flat in Edinburgh in midwinter. It had heating. I went out and wrote in cafes because the way to make Jessica fall asleep was to keep her moving in the pushchair. So I used to take her out, tire her out, put her in the pushchair, walk her along, the moment she fell asleep, into the nearest cafe and write. So this is Nicholson's, where I wrote huge parts of the book. This was a really great place to write because there are so many tables around here that I didn't feel too guilty about taking a table up for too long. And that was my favourite table. I always wanted to try and get that one because it was out of the way, in the corner. It was just great to look up when you were writing and stop and think about things and be able to look out on the street, which was quite busy. They were pretty tolerant of me in here, partly because one of the owners is my brother-in-law. And I used to say to them, well, you know, if it gets published, I'll try and get you loads of publicity. And it was all just a big joke. No one ever dreamt for a moment that was going to happen. To muster the willpower to keep going with no promise of publication, obviously I must have really believed in the story, and I did. I really believed in it. But it was more a feeling of, I have to do right by this book. I have to give it my best shot. But at the same time, my realistic side was reminding me that a completely unknown author always has a struggle to get published. And who knew, just because I thought it was so great, was no guarantee that anyone else would like it.
Coming up, Harry Potter gets thrown on the reject pile.
Is it nice to name names?
And J.K. Rowling is accused of casting spells.
I've lost count of the number of times I've been told I'm practicing witch.
J.K. Rowling sent her manuscripts off and found herself a literary agent, only to find that publishing houses threw Harry on the reject pile.
At the very beginning, we were very excited about it in the agency, but it was a very difficult book to sell. And then quite a large number of publishers turned it down. It was too long. It dealt with going away to school, which is something that was regarded as being not politically correct.
Well, of course, everybody now denies turning it down and want to distance themselves from this terrible, terrible error.
Is it nice to name names? You're nodding, but I don't think it's very nice to name names.
It was all the major publishers we know.
Among them, Puffin and Collins, for sure. It's like turning down the Beatles, isn't it? The very first question she asked me was, how do you feel about sequels? And then she told me the entire story of Harry Potter, all through the entire series. I realized, of course, that she knew exactly about this world and where it was going, who it was going to include, how the character would develop. And of course, it was fascinating because this doesn't normally happen. Children's book characters don't grow up in real time normally. You know, they're locked in the time they are, and the sequels are endless reruns of the same kind of adventures. But to have a character developing in real time as his age developed was a really interesting idea. I gave Jo one memorable piece of advice. After our first lunch together, we were sitting down, and I said, the important thing, Jo, is for you to
keep your real job. He said, Barry said, and Christopher, my agent, also said to me,
children's authors really don't make any money.
Both of them were at pains to say to me, you know, we really like the book, but, it's not that commercial.
Bloomsbury Publishing acquired what would become the biggest phenomenon in modern literature for only £2,500. That's about $4,000.
That was second to the birth of my daughter, the best moment of my life. Christopher phoned me up on a Friday afternoon, and he said it so matter-of-factly.
She was speechless, certainly, for at least the period of time it takes to build up enough steam for a big scream, I think.
And he said, "Are you all right? Are you still there?" And I said, well, it's just that my only lifetime ambition has just been fulfilled. And that was the best moment. Nothing since has come anywhere close to the fact that I was actually going to be in print. It was going to be an actual book in a bookshop. The best moment, oh my God.
J.K. Rowling introduced both Harry and her readers to a very magical world in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Not only does Harry find out that he's a wizard, but a famous one at that. He's renowned as the miraculous survivor of a brutal attack by the evil Lord Voldemort, who murdered his parents. Through his adventures at Hogwarts, Harry begins to find out the mysteries of his past.
The orphan is an excellent protagonist for any story because they're free and yet they're bereft. They're bereft of what gives a child most of the sense of who he or she is and where they come from and where they belong. So they're cut adrift in some strange way. They have this great need, because we all need to know where we come from and we need to find where we will eventually belong.
Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. But where to put you?
Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin.
Not Slytherin, eh?
When he first arrives at school, he's totally unsure. He has the feelings we all have as adults as well when you enter a new place and you don't know what's going on, but greatly exaggerated, obviously, by the fact that he is set apart, even there, by his fame and his ancestry. And this curious quirk that meant that he survived this, what should have been a fatal attack. He's every boy, but with a twist.
J.K. Rowling's mixture of the everyday and the magical, the matter-of-fact and the mystical, permeates her books.
You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making, he began. He spoke in barely more than a whisper, but they caught every word. Like Professor McGonagall, Snape had the gift of keeping a class silent without effort. As there is little foolish wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stop a death.
I don't believe in witchcraft, though I've lost count of the number of times I've been told I'm a practicing witch. 95% at least of the magic in the books is entirely invented by me. And I've used things from folklore and I've used bits of what people used to believe worked magically just to add a certain flavour, but I've always twisted them to suit my own ends. I mean, I've taken liberties with folklore to suit my plot. Witches and wizards are a huge part of children's literature. It'll never go away. I don't think it will ever, ever, ever go away. 100 years, 200 years' time, there'll be another kind of wizard story.
Up next, Harry Potter creates a bidding war in the U.S. publishing industry.
This is more money than I had ever paid any author as an advance, let alone an advance for a first novel.
In 1997, J.K. Rowling had moved on to the second book in the series, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Book 1 was doing well, but nowhere near its popularity today. J.K. Rowling was still making her living as a teacher. Then something happened that would change her world forever. In 1997, Harry Potter cast a spell on America. American publishers got caught up in a bidding war for the book.
My boss would say, "Okay, do you love it?" And I'd say, "Yes, I love it." "Okay, stay in the auction." do you love it this many dollars? Yeah. I kept saying yes. I just was getting more and more nervous because at the end of the day, this is more money than I had ever paid any author as an advance, let alone an advance for a first novel. It was unprecedented. She said, do you love it $105,000? And I said, yes, yes. She said, well, go ahead and make that offer, and that was it.
The deal with Scholastic meant that at last, J.K. Rowling could fulfill her lifelong ambition to become a full-time writer. J.K. Rowling's memories of her childhood have profoundly influenced her writing. She was born in 1965 in Chipping Sodbury and grew up near Bristol with her parents Anne and Peter, and her younger sister Di. She admits to being bookish and bossy as a child, not unlike one of Harry's best friends.
Wingardium Leviosa. Stop, stop, stop. You're going to take someone's eye out. Besides, you're saying it wrong. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
You do it then if you're so clever. When I started to write Hermione, when I actually got hold of a pen, she came incredibly easily, largely because she's me.
Go on, go on. Wingardium Leviosa. Wingardium Leviosa.
I was swotty, and I had that, you know, sense of insecurity underneath, trying to compensate for that by getting everything right all the time. And like Hermione, I projected a false confidence, which I know was very irritating to people at times, but underneath it all, I felt completely and utterly inadequate, which is why I completely understand Hermione.
Even as a very young child, J.K. Rowling loved to write, completing her first book at the age of 6.
The first finished book I did was a book called Rabbit, about a rabbit called Rabbit, thereby revealing the imaginative approach to names that has stood me in such good stead ever since. And I wrote the rabbit stories for ages, to the point where a series of books about Rabbit, which were very dull, illustrated by the author. The one book I could say that specifically influenced my work was The Little White Horse by Elizabeth Coolidge. She always listed the exact food they were eating. Wherever you were in the book, whenever they had a meal, you knew exactly what was in the sandwiches. And I just remember finding that so satisfying as a child.
There were shelves upon shelves of the most succulent-looking sweets imaginable. Creamy chunks of nougat, shimmering pink squares of coconut ice, fat, honey-coloured toffees, hundreds of different kinds of chocolate in neat rows. There was a large barrel of every flavour beans and another of fizzing whiz-bees, the levitating sherbet balls that Ron had mentioned.
As I moved into my teens, I was into very dramatic, gritty realism, entirely influenced by Barry Hines and Kes. Unfortunately, I didn't live in a northern town. My urban landscape wasn't very developed because I lived in Chepstow, in the middle of a lot of fields, and it's quite hard to be a disaffected urban youth in the middle of a muddy field. So this is a cottage, obviously, where I lived from the age of 9. My bedroom's furthest on the